Stream started, Chair.
Great. Thank you. Good morning, councillors, officers, members of the public and press. Welcome to this meeting of the Finance and Policy Committee. This meeting is a remote meeting and it's being live streamed and recorded. I'll now hand over to the Democratic Services team for the roll call.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Good morning, members. Good morning, everyone. Just go through the roll call of the members for this morning. If you could indicate, please, if you've got a copy of today's agenda papers with reference to the additional report that will be circulated very shortly. And if you could also indicate that you can see and hear everyone in the meeting. So we'll start with Councillor Christopher Akers-Belcher.
Thanks, Dave. Yes, I can see and hear everyone. I've received all the papers by the urgent item.
Thank you. Yeah. Councillor Brewer. No, Councillor Brewer. Councillor Lindridge.
Can see, can hear you. Got the papers other than the pinks, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Little.
Yes to all.
Thank you. Councillor Marshall.
Yes to all.
Councillor Moore.
Yes to all.
Councillor Prince.
Yes to everything apart from the thing you sent in. Thank you.
Yeah. Councillor Smith.
Yes to all.
Thank you. Councillor Tennant.
Yes, I have all the paperwork.
Thank you. Councillor Thomas.
Yes to all, with the exception of the additional item.
Yeah. Councillor Young.
Yes to all.
Thank you. We also have online this morning Councillor Tony Richardson.
Yes, Dave.
Tony. Thank you. That concludes the roll call, Chairman. Just to remind members, oh sorry, do we have Councillor James online as well?
Yes, you do.
Good morning, Margaret. Just to remind members, keep microphones on mute, please, during the meeting, just to reduce any background noise. And as usual, wherever it's required, unless there's no dissent, we will be undertaking votes by way of a recorded vote. Okay, it's back to you, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Can I just check if there are any declarations of interest by members on any of the agenda items moving forward? Don't see any. Thank you. Just before we go into the actual the agenda items themselves, there is an additional agenda item which is being tabled today. It's an urgent item that will be brought on pink papers at the end of the meeting. We've arranged to send around the report to all members and we'll go through the report with you at the time as well. Okay, so we'll check for the minutes then. First of all, we have the minutes of the last Finance and Policy Committee held on the 15th of February 2021. Are there any questions or comments on those minutes? No? Can I take those as a true record then if there's no dissent? Thank you. Then we have the meeting of the Safer Hartlepool Partnership held on the 22nd of January. Again, any questions or comments on that one? No. So with no dissent, we'll take those as agreed. And also the minutes of the Health and Wellbeing Board held on the 7th of December 2020. Okay, if there's no dissent on that, we'll take those as agreed to. Thank you. Now, as we move on to agenda item 5.1, can I just confirm both agenda items 5.1 and 5.3 do have confidential appendices? Are there any questions in relation to the items on pink papers? I'm asking now so we can potentially move the agenda around if necessary. Councillor Akers-Belcher.
Chair, I don't have any questions, but I should have announced, because I'm a trustee of the National Museum and the Royal Navy. I know it is on my declaration of interest, but I should have mentioned that at the beginning.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Akers-Belcher. Councillor Prince.
Thanks, Chair. I do have a question, and I'm not certain that it would give away the information that's on pink paper, so I think it's probably best I ask my question privately.
That's all right. So is it for 5.1 or 5.3?
Probably both.
Right, okay. So I'll tell you what then, we will jiggle it around a little bit and we'll bring 5.2 first. And then we'll move to 5.1, 5.3 and 5.4. Okay, 5.2, Director of Neighbourhoods and Regulatory Services. Bulky Waste Pilot Scheme. Oh, Councillor Young, you've got your hand up.
Chair, just in terms of the order, 5.4 doesn't have any pink papers on it, so I'd suggest 5.2
right.
and 5.4.
You're right, thank you. Okay, thank you. Tony Hanson, are you there to go through this report with us?
Yes, I am, Chair. I'll take you through the proposal for the pilot bulky waste scheme. So, purpose of the report, in terms of for members' benefits, on the 1st of December 2020, it was agreed that consideration of an annual bulky waste pilot scheme be explored and presented to Finance Policy Committee for consideration as part of the 2021-2022 budget considerations. Two options were presented for consideration by the members at that committee on the 25th of January, and it was agreed that a further report would be brought back to this committee, which could look at those options further and explore and clarify some of the points raised by members. Detailed analysis has since been carried out to compare the benefits of introducing a free bulky waste scheme against a self-funded extension of the existing paid collection scheme. Free bulky waste collections were previously paid by some members out of their ward budgets, and the impact of those on fly tipping figures have been assessed against the three most recent ward members' initiatives who carried those out, and they can be find the findings in sections 3.8 to 3.10 of the report. What it did show is that there were no reported fly tipping incidents did not reduce as a result of having the initiative in place during those periods and subsequently after. On the 23rd of January 2020, the national lockdown was announced and the bulky waste collection scheme ceased, along with the household waste recycling centres that was closed as well. While reported incidents of fly tipping were relatively low in March at 176 cases, April saw a clear increase in fly tipping, which continued into May when the figure was 305 cases when the household waste recycling centre reopened. However, there was no immediate impact or reduction as a result of fly tipping incidents following the opening of this site. By July 2020, the figure had risen to 443 reported fly tipping cases when the bulky waste collection scheme was reintroduced, and August saw an immediate impact and a significant reduction of fly tipping incidents, dropping to 294 cases, which continued right through to December, which saw only 148. What we found is that the majority of fly tipping in Hartlepool happens in back streets and is not traditionally thought of fly tipping, but is often reported as such. Investigations have established that fly tipping is carried out by individuals and businesses who tip their own rubbish, and by businesses that operate waste collection services and charge a fee for their service, then dump the waste without incurring the costs of legitimate disposal. Therefore, the majority of fly tipping is household waste, ranging from black sacks to mattresses, fridges and furniture, and as such can be disposed at either the household waste recycling centre or collected via a paid bulky waste collection. Therefore, it's proposed that the Council will introduce a self-funded extension of the existing scheme for 12 months based on the current charging requirements of £20 for 3 items, discounted to £10 for those on benefits, while the collection of one mattress is charged at £7.50. The extension will ensure that this is a recurring demand to sustain the additional income. And the intention will be to double the number of weekly paid collection slots and at the same time reduce the waiting times associated with requests for bulky waste removals. The proposal would support residents throughout the year. The proposal is based on the information presented in section 3 of the report, which demonstrates that the reintroduction of bulky waste collections had a positive impact on reducing the number of fly tipping cases across the borough. Furthermore, demand for the service currently outstrips the supply. Therefore, by doubling the number of slots available to residents to access 12 months of the year at a cost is likely to be more sustainable, self-financing, and have a greater impact on reducing the number of fly tipping cases. Members should note that an assessment of alternative service models of delivery was, as requested, was completed, and they can be found in sections 4.7 to 4.12 of the report. When we looked at costs of delivering along with charges, we found that when assessing against the private sector, we identified that our costs are comparable at a figure of £20 for the collections, although the council does offer the discount for those on benefits that others are unable to provide. Therefore, we do feel that the council is very competitive with other providers who offer the same service, and any cost reduction would have a detrimental impact on the council's budget, as it would create a cost pressure for service delivery that is currently self-financing in its current operation. A working group has also been established involving partners from all sectors, including local litter picking initiatives, to consider how fly tipping can be tackled and how it may be made easier for people to do the right thing. And the findings of the agreed option will feed into this, with an update report presented to future Neighbourhood Services Committee for information. A number of actions are being considered, developed and implemented by the group, which is supported by the approach of education, prevention and enforcement. The group has met twice so far and has discussed the potential of increasing bulky waste collection services available throughout the year, and has recognised that current delays in people being able to dispose of their large items legally through a quick bulky waste collection service does create the need or temptation to dispose of them illegally, and therefore they would support the proposal presented today. This is supported by some members of some of the group's findings to date, which appear to suggest a large proportion of bulky waste collections bulky waste fly tipping is done by a small number of waste collectors who charge to take their rubbish off people. So they're used to paying to dispose of the rubbish. They just want it done a lot quicker than we can currently provide and support. The group have also identified that there appears to be uncertainty around the service the council offers, the costs involved, etc. Therefore, it is proposed that a publicity campaign is also undertaken which clarifies what the council can offer and the benefits of using our services. Therefore, the recommendations are based on the findings of the investigative work detailed in this report. It's proposed that the council would introduce a self-funded extension of the existing scheme for a further 12 months based on the current charging requirements of £20 for 3 items, discounted to £10 for those on benefits. Members agree to this recommendation. It is also recommended that a publicity campaign is undertaken to promote the service and ensure that the public are aware of the services on offer. If an option is recommended by the committee which requires a funding request, it will need to be submitted to council as detailed in paragraph 5.4 of the report. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you for that, Tony. I'll bring Councillor Tennant in first.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just want to say that, obviously this has gone through Neighbourhood Services previously, and as Chair of Neighbourhoods, I think this recommendation is probably the best that we can offer with regard to bulky waste, and actually offering it from, as Tony's quite rightly pointed out, so we can actually offer more bulky waste collections than we would normally. And also that there is a discount for people on benefits. It's also important to remind ourselves that as an authority, we can offer these waste collections from a point of view of doing it legally and safely, which will give the public a lot more confidence, I think, in terms of the disposal of such waste. I think this recommendation is the right one, and I think we should take this forward and start promoting it to the public. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tennant. Councillor Prince.
Thank you, Chair. I do have a question. On 4.1, it says discounted to £10 for those on benefits, while the collection of one mattress is only charged at £7.50. Is that for any single item or just mattress? Because I remember in neighbourhoods, I asked if we could make it just any singular item would be £7.50.
It's currently just mattresses, Councillor Prince.
Look at that. I just think that, it's something. It's more encouraging. Yeah.
Yeah, something we could look at. Happy to look at that, Councillor Prince.
And then I just want to say that I echo John Tennant's sort of sentiments. I think it's great. And I really love the fact that basically we're hopefully going to be creating more employment for the town it's a suitable, solution. We need more employment, and to be able to offer a quicker service, I just think it's great. And then, I'm going to be a bit cheeky and ask if we can add an addendum, because I really, really love that we're going to promote this and use our marketing team. Could we perhaps include in this marketing strategy information on recycling and how to recycle properly? Because when I got elected, I went and spent a day at the tip, because I live the high life, and the ladies there were telling me that our recycling's not the best in Hartlepool because people don't necessarily understand everything. So I think that if we're going to utilise our marketing team to promote this, which we absolutely should, I would love to see recycling added into this so that we can really promote how Hartlepool residents can do their bit by doing the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Prince. I'm happy to support that as well, to be honest. And it ties in with the comment I was going to make just around the marketing campaign, Tony. And I've noticed, as other members have, there's an increase in kind of man with a van advertising around the town. And as we know from intelligence, often it's these individuals or companies who aren't registered who are causing a lot of the fly tipping in the town. And unfortunately, when we do identify where that waste comes from, it isn't the individual who's dumped it who's in trouble, it's the householder. And so obviously what we need to do is make sure that residents are signposted towards reputable and registered waste carriers. And I just think, even if it's just a small thing where we can signpost people towards checking to make sure the person that they're about to pay to get rid of their waste is registered and they are going to get rid of it in a safe and responsible manner. Councillor Richardson.
I'll give Sue first. She's on the committee.
Okay, thank you. So, Councillor Little.
In committee, when we had this on the agenda a few months ago, I asked if we could have some kind of disc like we've got on a taxi, to see, so we, instead of asking for paperwork, which they'll probably show anybody and they'll probably say, oh, HBC, yeah, blah, blah, blah. But if they had some kind of disc that like a driving school has for his license, a taxi has it on their license, HGVs and PSVs have a little disc in the window. I can't see it costing that much money if we could have some kind of disc, because if we do go to the white van man, at least if you see this in the window, we know that the license and they're going to dispose of it correctly.
I'll bring Tony back. I think is the issue, Tony, that we don't issue the licenses, do we? That's the obviously as with taxis and stuff, we issue the licenses. But Tony.
Yeah, that's correct, Chair. The licenses are issued by the Environment Agency. So the problem the local authority have is that we don't necessarily know as and when a person is being licensed and being issued as such. So it's difficult for us to be able to then issue something that they actually provide and the overseeing regulatory body for.
Can I come back, please, Chair?
Yeah.
Well, could we ask our white van man who disposes of waste if they pay a £5 charge, so we can issue a disc to say that the license to dispose of like our skips in Hartlepool, couldn't we do like an exercise like that where we put the cost onto them for like how much it costs? Because at the end of the day, they charge how much to take it away. I'm sure a couple of pound for what they're going to make is a lot better than it being dumped in Dalton Pacey back lane or on the A689 or wherever.
Yeah, I mean, what we could do, Chair, if it helps, we could within the publicity campaign is kind of identify a link to the Environment Agency and put the relevant numbers on there to make people aware of who you would contact if you need to clarify, and then we can make people aware of, as I said, those relevant links into the Environment Agency who would be able to check. So if you go onto the website, there is an easy link where you can click into it, and I think it's making that aware. And what we can then highlight to the public is, if you do wish to use someone, it's very simple. You check into this, you put the relevant details in, and it comes up to say if they've got a valid license or not. So we're more than happy to look at that and work with the EE around producing something which we could share as part of the publicity campaign that we're going to do.
Thank you. Councillor Richardson.
Yeah, well, just I'm over the moon that you're starting to advertise it, because a lot of people don't know about the bulky waste. And also, what is the waiting list now for if you phone in? It used to be 3 weeks. I don't know if it's come down any. And the other question is, why do we have to wait, Tony, 72 hours before fly tips removed? And they're saying it's because of COVID. But I put my dustbin out, and that's not there 72 hours. It's moved the same day.
Yeah, in terms of that one, obviously that's the COVID guidance that we have to follow in terms of the health and safety guidance, which is issued to our waste collection operatives. They don't necessarily know when it's been, so we have to leave it for 72 hours at the moment. In terms of the dustbins, what we promote, or the wheelie bins, we promote to people when you put them out that obviously you should clean the handle as you leave it there for the operatives, so that when they're picking them up. But they also do have disposable gloves when they collect, or safety gloves which they wear when they put them onto the back of the van. But again, we encourage every household at the moment, when they're placing the bin for collection, they should be sanitising it down before our officers come along and remove it.
And the waiting time, sorry.
Yeah, the waiting times, we originally got it down to a week before COVID. If you were able to ring up before COVID happened, you would get a collection within a week. Unfortunately, because of the different working arrangements, obviously it's increased, and that's the reasons why we're looking to introduce this proposal. It's about 2 to 3 weeks. The intention of obviously doubling the collections is we'll bring it back to the week that it was currently operating at before that. So as you said, the hope is that we'll be down to less than a week by the time we get these additional on, if members support the proposal presented to them today.
Thank you. Cheers, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Richardson. Councillor Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. And just sort of like supporting Amy's point, and I just wonder if, particularly on the marketing and publicity side, if there's an opportunity for some joint working with Cleveland Fire Authority, as quite often some of the fly-tipped rubbish around the area ends up being a call out for the Fire Authority.
It's a good idea, to be honest, Stephen. Yeah, I'm sure we can pick that up with the comms team as well. Okay, I don't see any other hands raised at the moment. So the recommendation is set out in 9. Are there, well, you can read what the recommendations are. Is there any dissent from the recommendations as set out in the report? Councillor Prince?
Not dissent as such. I would just like it noted that we're sort of going to look at the marketing campaign.
Yeah, thank you. So we'll put another one in there, 9.4. Obviously, David, can you kind of pull together the reflections from the comms team, please? Thank you. Okay, with that in then, are we all happy? Great. Thank you all very much. So that's 5.2. We'll now move to 5.4, Neighbourhood Investment Programme. Again, Director of Neighbourhoods and Regulatory Services.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of the report is to provide an update on the capital investment programme that delivered improvements to neighbourhoods across Hartlepool through the Neighbourhood Investment Programme. The report also proposes 3 schemes for approval as part of the underspend remaining from the original allocation, while the report also seeks members' approval to consider a themed approach to future projects based upon the £1 million allocation previously approved by full council. In March 2017, Finance and Policy Committee considered a programme of capital investments to deliver improvements to neighbourhoods. Schemes were submitted by ward members for consideration and assessed on the following criteria: a scheme that falls within an area of physical and social regeneration, a scheme which contributes towards community well-being, and a scheme that has a positive impact on community safety. The Neighbourhood Investment Programme has benefited from funds provided from 13 Group and other third parties such as Monaghan Green and Sport England, which has led to a total investment of over £2.75 million in projects so far. In total, 66 projects were considered,
now
and these included the initial list and those subsequently added over the past 4 years. To date, 28 projects have been completed, 5 schemes are in progress, while 3 have funding allocated. These have included small projects such as the Queen's Canopy Trees and Memorial Area at Summerhill and the clean of statues in Church Square, to larger schemes comprising enhancements to Rosmere Park and the relaying of tennis courts and seat in Carew, and investment in 4 play areas across the borough. Selection of the completed schemes can be found in Appendix 1 of the report. In terms of the proposals, a member seminar held on the 1st of March 2021, a presentation was given to update members on the success of the projects undertaken so far and to seek their support with schemes proposed for the existing underspend. Members' views and aspirations were also sought with regards to the new budget allocation and whether the same criteria should be applied for the implementation of the new schemes. There's an allocated amount of 260,000 from the original 1.5 million allocated for this project, and 3 schemes were presented to members at the seminar to take forward, which can be found within the report of 4.5. Those are the British Cycling bid, which is £250,000 of funding has been secured from the British Cycling's Places to Ride programme to develop accessible, traffic-free community facilities and opportunities that encourage more people to cycle more often and hence lead healthier, more active lives. The project will focus primarily on Summerhill Country Park, with supporting activity at Seaton Park, and will target young people, families, disabled people and women. Funding is required for the council to take this project forward. Therefore, it's proposed to allocate 120,000 from the Neighbourhood Investment Programme budget, which will help us to secure the 250,000 from the British Cycling's Places to Ride programme. Seascapes. Seascapes covers the magnesium limestone coast from south of the River Tyne to the River Tees. The project, supported by the National Lottery Heritage Fund, aims to better protect and celebrate this heritage-rich and distinctive coastline. 20 interconnect projects will be delivered over a period of 4 years, many of which will be in Hartlepool. These will include Hartlepool Light Scheme, which will receive repairs and restoration to the highlight located on the waterfront, and Beacon Tower on North Pier, which are both Grade 2 listed buildings. It is proposed that 10,000 is allocated from this budget in order to facilitate a scheme of restoration works for each structure. And finally, Seaton Carew Bus Station public toilets. Seaton Carew is a key location for residents and visitors to Hartlepool. More than ever over the past year, the prom has been used by people taking their daily exercise, demonstrating the popularity of the area. The bus station is a Grade 2 listed building and provides key public facilities to the south of the area. It is proposed that the remaining allocation of 130,000 is allocated to support work to the property in order to ensure these facilities are of a standard expected by the users. In terms of phase 2 of the Neighbourhood Investment Programme, members' views at the seminar were sought that the focus of the 1 million funding should be directed towards infrastructure that supports health, physical activity and play, improved toilet facilities and shopping parades. There were 30 projects not taken forward from the original list of 66, therefore taking into account the requests of members at the seminar and those schemes that remain outstanding, we can split them into the following 3 themes. 5.3 shows the infrastructure that supports health, physical activity and play. And those schemes within that were Macefield Road and Midlothian Field, the Headland, Coronation Drive, Central Park and Rift House Recreation Area. In terms of toilet facilities, in addition to the improvements to the toilet facilities proposed for the Seaton Carew bus station, we will undertake a survey and identify estimated costs for improvements to the other public toilets that we operate at the Coronation Drive, on the Headland, Rossmere Park and Ward Jackson Park. In terms of shopping parades, there were 3 areas identified from the previous member request, which were the north end of the Fen shops, the northern facades to the passage to the improvements on Northgate, and the seafront from Seaton Hotel to Station Lane. In terms of COVID-19, which can be found in 5.6 of the pot, members may also wish to consider whether we set aside a pot of money to commemorate COVID-19, as we're currently working with the voluntary community sector and will be undertaking some further public consultation as how best to mark the pandemic which we've gone through. It's proposed, subject to member approval, that the above schemes are assessed by officers and who will look at high-level estimated costs and to look at alternative funding options which could support the delivery of some of those schemes previously mentioned. Once potential fundings are explored and estimated costs identified, it's proposed to bring a further report back to the Finance and Policy Committee that will set out how the schemes compare against the 1 million budget allocation for the second phase of the project. In terms of recommendations, it's recommended that committee notes the current progress on implementing the Neighbourhood Investment Programme. That committee approves to provide match funding of 120,000 for the British Cycling bid and accept the award of the 250,000 from them. That committee approves the proposed works to provide funding towards the Seascape project of 10,000. That committee approves the proposed works to Seaton Carew bus station public toilets of 130,000. And that committee approved the proposal set out, apologies, that should say in section 5, not 4.6, so in section 5 of the report, which allows officers to undertake further work to identify high-level estimated costs and explore other funding options to support the delivery of those schemes mentioned in section 5 of the report. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you very much for that detailed report, Tony. I've got Councillor Young.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think it's a great report, Tony. Well put. I do think that the member seminar was really useful, and I just wanted to highlight the support that we had for Macefield Road and Midlothian Field. And I think we need to be very clear at this point that those two schemes in particular do need to go ahead, and we do need to make that decision probably today, in all honesty. So they're two things that jumped out at the seminar, and they're jumping out to me now. So I'd like to push them forward as part of that round two.
Thank you, Councillor Young. Councillor James.
Lisa
is now joining.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mike, for your comments. I just want to try and add something just in order to try and assist officers. I am aware that the site on Macefield Road, which is the preferred site, to be fair, for residents and members, is reasonably small. There is also, as I understand it, work currently taking place towards the end of that strip to actually put some street parking area in, which will again reduce the grassed area. So I would suggest that if there are issues of any kind with that small plot, that the alternative plot that would be suitable in my view, and I hope members would support it, would be the land that is wedged between Swinburne Road and Catcoat Road, which is a much larger site. But as I said, the preference, because of the school's vicinity and the Rifty and youth club, etc., are all in that vicinity on Macefield Road. That would be the preferred option if that's workable. Thank you.
I think the Rift House site, it also benefits from natural security as well, doesn't it, with plenty of properties around it. Councillor Akers-Belcher.
Thank you, Chair. It was just in relation to the item in the report that talks about Rift House Recreation Ground, and I have mentioned it on a few occasions.
There was a few complaints on it yesterday because of the...
Lisa.
I'll just wait till Lisa's finished.
Lisa
is now exiting.
All right. It's just that on the Rift House Recreation Ground, we've been going on quite a number of years in order to see the improvements, and we have a number of volunteers who access the ground. And I had a conversation with Gemma Patak last week because one of the items from my ward member budget that I funded was a gate between the community garden on Rift House Recreation Ground throughout the Waverley allotments, which was funded, and the gate was never installed. So I've asked somebody to check up on that, and if we can confirm, what was happening with it. But one of the reasons was a number of the volunteers who access the community garden are unable to do so because of the state of the lower car park. And there's no disabled access. There's potholes that have been there for quite a number of years, and it needs urgently addressing from a safety point of view. But the actual report, when you have a look at it, and whilst the report has been it's really well put together, and there's a lot of information for members, and I don't have any problems with the proposals. But under item 12, it has other considerations, equality and diversity considerations. Well, for the last few years, a lot of people cannot have access from Waverley Terrace because if they're disabled, if they're elderly, the roads, there is no way on earth that you could walk there if you had any ailments whatsoever. You couldn't take a wheelchair through there. You can't have access from the top of the thoroughfare in between the allotments because there's no disabled access there. I've reported the access from Westbrook, and the only available access would be from the top car park. And even that now, they've actually put some barriers in place. So in actual fact, under the Equality Act, people who have those protected characteristics for disability have no access to the recreation ground. And I think in the meantime, that needs addressing so that people do have full access to the recreation ground. And I would like my comments noted within the decision that under item 12, then we should ensure that all our schemes under the Neighbourhood Investment Programme have full access for everybody, not just able-bodied people.
Sorry, I was still muted there. Thank you, Councillor Akers-Belcher. Can I get some further details on that one from you after the meeting, if you wouldn't mind? Because I'm not 100% sure of the location of where you're proposing.
I think Tony does. We've had a number of meetings. We've done a lot of consultation with the community, and that was one of the reasons prior to the member seminar I said that we needed to consider them, because it'll actually draw down some match funding from landfill tax monies, and that's why it was so important. But the priority for me at the moment is that disabled access, because a lot of people are completely disenfranchised from using the recreation ground at the moment. But happy to discuss after the meeting, Shane.
Cool, thank you. Councillor Little.
Thank you, Chair. I'm absolutely over the moon that Seaton toilets are going to, just the dogs will start barking, are going to be having a refit, because it's more than well overdue. Lockdown has shown how many people come and have a walk along the beach or the prom, and I think they're well overdue. For COVID-19, for a memorial, I think that it's a beautiful idea, and we should put money aside for it. Like, it's not just people who've died of COVID, it's people who've also passed away of other illnesses, who haven't been able to, families haven't been able to celebrate their lives, and I think that would be a wonderful idea, that we can include all deaths, not just COVID deaths, all deaths that have happened during the pandemic stages.
I think part of the conversations we'd had previously, Councillor Little, was that it wouldn't necessarily be a memorial per se. It would be, because we don't want to just focus on the negatives of this past year. I think it's really important that we look at some of the huge positives that have come out of this past year as well, the amazing community work that's gone in, the way that so many people have come together and helped each other. And I think what's important is that whatever we move forward, certainly from my view, is that we encompass all of the positives that have come out of this past year and pandemic as well, and not just focus on the negatives, which clearly there will be, and there are, but there are many good things that have come out of this past year too.
I think it's brought a lot of communities back together, where some people had lost that community spirit, but it's been reinvented through the pandemic. So yes, I totally take that on board.
Thank you. Denise?
Yeah, I was just, I think we talked about a place of reflection and of hope for the future, hadn't we? But I was just wanted to take the opportunity that we are going to be doing something on the 23rd and 24th of this week. Sorry, not this week, it's next week, isn't it? Regarding lights, doing some lighting work that we've been doing during this last year to enable, because we will have had a year of restrictions then, and I just wanted, we will be letting members know about that, and we're just working through that detail. But it'll be, we'll be doing something at Seaton, at the Headland, and also at the National Museum of the Royal Navy, and lighting, like a little lighting show. And we're going to do it over 2 days, so because we don't want to encourage people to come out, but we also want to mark the occasion. It's a year of restrictions, and I think it would be, well, I think everyone would appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Tennant.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm very happy to support the neighbourhood investment programme. It's a very clear, well-written report that sets out exactly what, not just what members have asked for in the past, but also what members have asked for now. Particularly with regard to the Maysfield Road play area, which Marjorie, I know, has raised this on a number of occasions, and pleased to say that will be going ahead if recommended today, which I'm aware that the previous leadership were not going to let that happen. So thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Tennant. Just one last thing from me then, Tony, just in 5.5 in relation to the shopping parades and Seaton front. I see the comment there where it says about repaving both sides of Seaton front up to Station Lane with quality paving slabs. It's a niggly thing I appreciate, but the paving that's currently there, it was obviously very high quality when it was placed down, but it's an absolute nightmare and it raises all the time. So can we ensure, and I'm sure you will, but just for the record, can we make sure that it's durable as well, whatever goes down, because we don't want to have to keep replacing things as we've had to with this one. Okay, the recommendations then, I don't see any further hands. So the recommendations are set out in 14. Is there any dissent from those recommendations, other than the obviously the additional comments that we've raised today in relation to disabled access, which we're going to be picking up separately? I don't see any dissent. Okay, thank you, members. Right, Councillor James.
Yeah, I'll be leaving the meeting now, Chair, because there's no reason for me to stay. The piece that I came for has been dealt with. So can I thank members for your support? Bye.
Bye. Okay, so we'll then move on to 5.1 then, the Capital Investment Strategy for the National Museum of the Royal Navy. Managing Director.
Thank you, Chair. This report is to obtain a decision in relation of releasing capital funding. Whilst I've got delegations to issue some grants, this is about entering into a loan, and we need to get members to approve this. So the Council's master plan for the waterfront site is designed to maximise the sustainability and use of this site, and the Council's investment strategy for this waterfront is based on establishing a new leisure facility, further development and expansion of the National Museum of the Royal Navy, and also improve some enhancements with respect to public realm. The approved capital investment strategy has already earmarked resources for waterfront projects, and development work is currently underway. The investment is funded from a combination of external grant funding, including the Combined Authority as well as Hartlepool Borough Council. I take members through to section 4 of the report. The National Museum of the Royal Navy have identified a potential opportunity to secure a major collection of swords which are of national significance. Securing this collection would provide a major national visitor attraction for the expansion of the National Museum itself. The collection is for 300 swords and includes Lord Nelson's personal fighting sword. The National Museum are exploring various external funding opportunities to meet all, if or part of the costs to acquire this collection. However, in the current situation with COVID, external funders are also reviewing their priorities, and this is likely to delay any decisions in releasing funding. So in view of that uncertainty, the National Museum have asked the Council if we could release some of the existing funding that we've already allocated to them in the investment strategy to purchase the swords collection. The National Museum recognise they will need to repay the loan, and the loan agreement will specify repayment for either one or a combination of the bullets set out in section 4.5 of the report. The financial risk and asset management considerations are set out in a confidential paper attached to the report. I'm happy to answer any questions, Chair, before we move to the recommendations.
Thank you, Denise. I don't have any questions myself, but I just speak in support of this, to be honest. Now, it's no secret that I'm somewhat of a kind of a history buff and naval geek especially, so I would be likely to say this, but honestly, this is, for me, a huge win for the town. And that's not just me saying it. I have a good friend who is actually a naval historian, and who reached out to me when he heard about it. And he said it's an absolute coup for the town, and he just wished that other naval museums were taking such an active interest in trying to tell the story and engage in a completely new audience like Hartlepool is. So I think it's going to be fantastic for us if we can pull this off. And hey, one of the swords is Nelson's own fighting sword. Can't get better than that, can you really? Councillor Prince, I'm aware one of the questions you might have wanted to raise potentially is on pink papers. So if it's all right, I'll bring in a couple of others first, and I'll bring you in afterwards.
I'm not going to ask secret questions.
You're not?
White questions.
All right, okay. Go on.
White paper questions, sorry.
Go on
then. Well, actually, you might tell me it's a secret, but with the bullet points, setting out how they would repeals, would there be a caveat in this to say that they would not allow to sell the collection in order to recoup the costs? Because I am a massive fan of this idea, like it's exciting, but it would worry me that if they struggled with sort of funding or their revenue themselves doesn't pick up with COVID when things reopen, is there a caveat to say they wouldn't be allowed to sell them to Peel's back?
If I can, Chair. Yes,
Please,
we'll
yeah.
include that, Councillor Prince. That will be included in the details. And also we need to include a caveat that actually says you can't move them outside Hartlepool as well, because there's obviously be a risk that they actually went down to Portsmouth. Not on a permanent basis. They might want to loan them round, but not on a permanent basis.
Thank you, Denise. That's great. Can I ask another one? Sorry.
Yeah.
Is that okay? It just says on 4.4, it's anticipated that the March 2021 budget may extend an existing scheme. Do we know, do we know the answer to whether that's you're all laughing.
Oh, no, I'm not, because I knew you were going to ask. I knew one of the councillors would ask me a question on that. And with me being on leave last week, Amy, I've not noticed any changes in the budget. And I'll hand over to Mr. Little to see if he knows. But
I don't know yet, to be honest. I haven't seen it yet in the budget pack, but it's about 3 inches thick, so we can double check that and see if we can find whether they've extended it or not.
Was that everything from your end, Amy?
Yes, for now, thank you.
Okay. Well, Chris, if we could get that answer and then we'll send it round to members, if that's all right. Thanks. Councillor Lindridge.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I think this is a big opportunity for the town as well. It's a great partnership we've got with the National Museum, and I think this will enhance the opportunities for further visitor attractions to bring them into the town. There's also, obviously, in 4.4, the opportunity to reclaim up to £80,000 in exhibition tax relief. I am obviously aware of the pink papers and the amount of drawdown that we're looking at, and I would be think this is in the interest of the town, that would benefit from this. It is a substantial amount, but I think the benefits far outweigh the risks, and I would be supportive of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lindridge. Councillor Tennant.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just want to say it's fantastic to see this level of investment being brought into the town. As somebody who's avid reader of history and such like, it's fantastic to see that such kind of future investment and items that could be brought to the town that will attract people to come and visit Hartlepool, which is part of our future agenda of Hartlepool as a town. And it just shows that the partnership that we have with the National Museum is getting stronger and stronger. So I'm absolutely over the moon with this. So I just want to say massive well done. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tennant. I think I just realised that we get hung up on some of the things, like I mentioned there, that as part of this collection is Nelson's fighting sword. But actually, quite interestingly for Hartlepool, there is, I believe, the sword of the captain of HMS Shannon, which, whilst many people may not appreciate the significance, Shannon was another leader class frigate like the Trincomalee is, and she was involved in in a battle of Chesapeake Bay in one of the American wars. One of the American wars. And I think what's good for Hartlepool is that it enables the museum to start telling a story more specifically around Trincomalee and its sister ships, and it helps kind of connect the museum itself to the ship. So it isn't all just about Nelson. Okay, so the recommendations are in the report. It's been good to hear such support for it. Is there any dissent? Great, thank you very much. Next item then, sale of land at Coronation Drive, Director of Resources and Development.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to seek members' views on progressing the sale of the land at Coronation Drive. I think members will be well aware of where the land is. It's shown on Appendix 2 of the report. It's just under 14 acres of land next to Coronation Drive and Warrior Drive at Seaton. Members will probably be well aware that at the moment it's grassland, but it has some large spoil heaps on it at the moment from previous works that were undertaken there. It will need an awful lot of remediation to bring it back into use, but the technical people saying that's all possible. The costs of that remediation work are set out in the confidential appendix. I think members will be well aware this is a piece of land that's been identified since at least 2010 as suitable for housing. We've tried in the past to market this, unfortunately not successfully in the past, but a major developer that actually has experience in this type of land and building on that type of land for residential purposes has approached us with an interest in purchasing the land. The details of effectively their offer at the moment are set out in confidential appendix 3. Obviously, there is a long way to go in terms of those figures, a lot of work to clarify those figures, but hopefully they can be realised. But clearly, given the nature of the land, there's a risk around that. I think the other financial consideration, as well as alongside a capital receipt, as we set out in paragraph 5, is that we will get additional council tax revenues from that development, and that could be anywhere between 230 and 263,000 a year. Obviously, that'll depend on the types of houses that are built on there and the timescale it takes to build them. I think, obviously, we'd need to protect the council's interest with an appropriate legal agreement, and that's covered in section 7 in the risks section. And I think what we've gone on to recommend in the report, because of the issues around potential abnormal costs as further site investigation works are complete, if you're happy for us to progress this to the next stage, we'll bring back a further report with effectively a final offer of a capital receipt in due course when that more detailed work's complete. And at that point, Chair, it's for members to consider the recommendations in section 11 of the report.
Okay. Thank you, Chris. Councillor Young, your hand went up at the start of this agenda item, but it's not there now. Were you wanting to come in or not?
No, it's fine.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Prince?
This question's not on pinks.
Okay.
But I do have a question for the pink bit. So when we look at selling land, and obviously for housing development, please excuse me because I'm not on planning, so this is not really something I know a massive amount about. Whose responsibility is it? Is it ours or the developers to look at sort of the existing infrastructure and primary schools and, you know, those considerations that come with a housing development?
Do you want to come in?
Yeah, I was going to say, sorry, Seven.
I assume Tony would pick it up.
No, that's fine. I thought Tony had gone because his 2 reports had gone. I do apologise. Tony, if you want to come in, that's fine.
Yeah, I just to add, it's obviously what the council do is we look at whenever development comes forward, it's what contributions they would have to contribute. So part of the section 106 negotiations look at making any site that's got to be what's deemed to be a sustainable community when it's built. So therefore, any infrastructure requirements as part of that have to be considered within the proposal. And then as part of that process, developers can do what's called a viability assessment to determine whether or not they feel their costs are at a certain amount, and then what the council's contributions would be from the 106. And that's all within the negotiations that take place before a report is then presented to committee for approval.
Does that adequately answer the question for you, Councillor Prince?
It does, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lindridge.
Thanks, Chair. I just want to raise something in terms of land contamination. If we go back 20 years or whatever, might be wrong with that, might be a bit longer. I know my sister had a property round on the front there near Hornsey Close. And there was a lot of issues years after where land was contaminated and gardens were dug up and such like. I'm presuming that we take this into consideration, that when the developer goes into there, they'll do them checks. We don't want to end up sort of building houses on there, then later on you find that land has been contaminated because we haven't really been as robust with the checks with the developer. Can you just confirm that that is part of the process?
Should I come on first, then Tony might want to add to it? Without actually naming figures on the Norfolk publication appendix, we have clearly identified that there are significant remediation costs, and the proposed purchaser are aware of those issues around the surveys that have been undertaken. That's reflected in the financial offer. Again, it's in the Norfolk publication. But if you look at those figures, Councillor Lindridge, you can see that there are very significant costs of remediating that land. Obviously, there's a removal of the mounds and some other remediation works that will be needed to obviously make sure the sites are safe to be built on. I think the other thing is this developer has a lot of experience of building on these brownfield sites. You know, they're not a builder who just builds on nice greenfield sites where it's, you know, there's never any problems. So there's that added benefit that they've got that experience. But I don't know whether Tony wants to comment any more on the technical aspects of it.
Thanks, Chris. I suppose just to add to that, Chair, if it's okay, just to reassure members that any developer has to produce what's called a remediation strategy as part of those works. So they must advise the council on how they propose to address the contaminated land on the site. Only once that is signed off by the council's professional officers could that progress. So it must be signed off to a certain level that meets the requirements of what we're asked for.
Thanks, Chair. Sorry, I fully understand that. That's the answer I was really wanting. Obviously, on the pinks, we look at the purchase price, etc., sale price, and that does reflect the difference. The land contamination is a big area, especially the high mounds, and that does need to be looked at closely. So I'm comfortable with your answer on there. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Lindridge. And just for clarity then, Tony, picking up on the point that Jim raised, when a previous development was done, well, 20, 30 years ago, however long it was, clearly rules, regulations and what's expected of developers and clear up sites has moved on significantly since then, hasn't it? So, yeah, I think lessons have been learned, not just locally, but nationally, I think it's fair to say. Councillor Smith.
Hi, thank you. On the front, it says the purpose of the report is to seek approval for the sale of the residential development land, yet I was under the impression this was to go forward with the reports to see what the land was like, and then it would come back to finance and policy then to decide whether the sale would actually go through. Am I correct?
Yes, sorry, we haven't changed the front report. Recommendation 11.3 covers exactly the point that Councillor Smith made. At least I hope it does. That we will bring back another report. I mean that was loud and clear understanding. Sorry.
Okay, no,
sorry,
that's fine.
Sorry, the front hadn't been clearer.
Yeah. I support the investigation at the land for the possibility of the sale, but I do want to make sure that if the 106 contributions are going to be drastically reduced or to zero, which is what it was previously on other sales of land, then I will not support the housing development. The money needs to be invested in Seaton. We have a small primary school that is not sufficient for the people who actually live in Seaton already. So if we're going to add another 150 houses to it, then, you know, the capacity of that school will not be able to obtain. So we do need the 106 monies, and we do need to look at the development of the area that we're gonna do into. So I do agree with looking forward to it, looking into it. But if the 106 monies and the monies from this development isn't sufficient, then I won't support the report further.
That's absolutely fine. And that will be a discussion for the future finance and policy. So I think that's a fair comment to make, Councillor Smith. Were there any questions on the pink paper items? Councillor Prince.
Yes. Do we need to go into a closed?
Yeah, we do. So I just wanted to confirm. So Okay, I'll move that. We need to move into a closed session. Are you going to second that, Councillor Prince?
Yes, please.
Thank you. Just wait a second while we get this stream temporarily paused. Great, thank you. We're back in open session, members. Okay, we'll now go back into the debate around items that aren't included within the confidential report. Councillor Little.
Thank you, Chair. One concern that I've got, and it goes back to many moons ago, God, I forgot the name of the street, of Lithgow Close and Wainwright Walk and that, of the contamination land there. Because this used to be a skip. I can remember going to this skip with my parents. Like, how we're not going to get this to come back on our, like, and bite us on our noses like we did with Lithgow and have to remove all, like, several feet of soils, and or is this too early of a debate, like a question to ask at this stage? Too early to, right?
It's a bit early, but it was asked earlier as well.
It's the soil. It's the soil that really concerns me, and the chemicals and everything that are in that soil. And I don't want them to come around and say to us in 10, 15 years' time that there's something wrong with that soil, and we have to remove God knows how many tonnage of soil to replace the soil. So I can just remember Lithgow Close and all of them having to have the gardens redone, and we had to foot the bill.
Bring Denise in.
Thanks, Shane. I don't know, so you might have been out at the meeting for a while, but we discussed this slightly earlier on in the report. I think it was Councillor Lindridge raised it because his sister actually lived there. But the soil, part of the remediation works, it will involve the removal of any soil that is contaminated, and Tony had also commented that a remediation strategy has to be produced by the developer. So we need to, and we'll have to sign that off. The professional officers will sign that off, and it won't be until then. And we'll also monitor the site, as well as the Environment Agency will be involved, I'm sure, for monitoring contaminated land to make sure that everything is removed. So
I might have had noisy dogs at the time, so I might have had to run them away. Sorry.
That was thought.
Lisa?
Just coming back to John's point and a couple of other councillors' points where they say that this is an eyesore and needs to be developed. I think that you find that if you speak to quite a few residents in Seaton, that it isn't actually an eyesore, and they are quite happy with the wildlife that lives there and the way that it actually looks. So I totally agree, we'll investigate the land, but going forward, I do think you need to listen to the people of Seaton and what they actually say about the development of the land, because there is people that live there and do actually quite like it.
Thank you. I think as well, it is worth pointing out to all members that this, and this is not trying to be controversial or contradicting what Councillor Smith has just said, but this land has been identified since at least 2010 for potential housing developments as well. So this isn't a new idea and something that's just been dreamt up to push through. Okay, we've had a good debate on that one. We'll move members to the recommendations set out in paragraphs 11 and 11.1, 2 and 3.
Agreed.
Is there any Mike agrees. Is there any dissent? No. Okay, thank you very much. 5.3. And then we have an additional report that does require attention that I alluded to at the start of this meeting. It is a confidential report, so I will need to move into closed session, I'm afraid.
Chair?
Yeah.
Is it worth doing item 6 first then?
Yeah, let's do that. Thanks, that's a good check. Yeah, sorry, I'm just thinking what was in those 6.1, 6.2. That's not a bad shout, actually. Thank you. So yeah, we'll move into 6.1 and 6.2 first, sorry, and then we'll go into the additional. Okay, so 6.1, COVID-19 financial position update, Director of Resources and Development.
Thank you, Chair. This is a long report, but I will try and be as brief as possible and cover all of the issues in the report. It's to give members information on all of the COVID funding that's come to the council from the government, both to support the council and to pay out to support businesses and the community, etc. And I'll cover that in a bit of detail as we go through the report. We've set out in previous reports that at the very start, about a year ago, there was a lot of worry about what will be the financial impact of COVID on councils. I think there was a lot of fear that we will be left with a lot of costs and a lot of lost income and wouldn't receive support from the government. We did get early statements from ministers that they would do everything that they could to support councils, but there were long delays between those announcements and actually funding coming through. But thankfully, particularly in relation to the council's budget, those funding announcements came through. And as I say, I'll divide the report into a few sections. So section 4 firstly deals with the impact on the council, and that really picks up the points I've just made. It took between the 16th of March and the 12th of October for us to get funding certainty. There were 4 funding allocations to councils, £4.7 billion, and Hartlepool shares just over 9.3. That's also complemented with other measures to support the impact on councils, so we can spread collection fund deficits over 3 years rather than just funding 1 year. We are getting some support towards the collection fund deficit and the business rates deficit. I'll not go into the detail, we covered that in the medium term report, but those last issues don't quite give the support that they say on the tin. They're not quite as generous as the headline announcements that the government make, but nevertheless as a package, we think on the impact on the council's budget that we should have sufficient funding to deal with the costs and the income losses. Section 5 deals with further funding that councils will receive in the new financial year 21-22. The government has said that that's the last funding allocation for COVID for councils. Nationally, it's 1.55 billion, and Hartlepool's share is just under 3.2 million. The government have said, as I've set out in paragraph 5.2, where they expect that money to be spent. So it's things like ongoing impacts on adult social care, children's services, public health, household waste, etc. That was their initial statements alongside the funding announcements in January. They've subsequently issued a letter that we've included at Appendix A from the Department of Health and Social Security that really reinforces those messages around adult social care and the types of costs that they expect councils will have to fund from that. At the moment, it's too early to say what we'll need that funding for. And as we set out in the MTFS report, any proposals to use this funding will have to come back to this committee for approval. At section 6, we set out the funding that the government have provided for specific objectives that they have given to councils. We've effectively got 16 grant regimes running from the government to cover either a very specific government policy objective or additional COVID activities that they want the councils to undertake. Some of these activities will fall this year and into the new financial year, so we'll be carrying forward grant into 21-22. It's unclear whether at the end of 21-22, if we haven't spent the grant, will it be clawed back? But I suppose if we haven't spent the grant, we didn't need it, so we're no worse off or better off than on those specific grants. And it's just useful we've got that flexibility. As I say, the appendix provides the detail of those grants. Probably the largest one is the Control Outbreak Fund, around how we manage local outbreaks, etc. We also had funding as set out in section 7 in the current year to support LCTS households, and that was one-off funding allocated to councils, and the government were very clear how we had to use that money. We've set out in paragraph 7.3 that the forecast outturn that would be uncommitted funding of about 294,000. As of Friday last week, that funding had dipped down a little bit further to 281. The caseloads are just a little bit volatile at the moment. They're up some weeks and down the following week, but that's the latest estimate. And we've set out how we'll manage that funding in 7.5 year end. Section 8 deals with test and trace support payments. These were the payments that councils had to administer on behalf of government to households. The payments were set at £500. This was very much a government-defined scheme, and there wasn't a lot of discretion at all, although they give us some funding to have a local discretionary scheme, which give a little bit of flexibility. We've set out in the report how much of the mandatory funding we'd spent. When the report was prepared, we'd nearly spent the initial allocation. As of Friday last week, we've spent 114,000 allocated by government. They will top that up, so we'll keep paying out those £500 where people are eligible, and we will get that funding back. Similarly, the discretionary payments, we had spent about 79% of the allocation when the report was prepared. That's now up to 86%. So that's moving along and keeps changing on a daily basis. We set out in the report that there's an expectation, and it's been confirmed, that they're going to extend the £500 scheme to include more eligible people, basically parents or guardians of children who may have to self-isolate now that the schools have returned. This scheme is effective and live from the 8th of March. As of this morning, we still haven't got the details from the government as to how the scheme will operate. And obviously, as soon as we have that, we can let members know. So that is a difficulty. That we know there's a scheme to implement, but we don't know how to implement it. We don't know the rules, and we'll obviously work with Sally Robinson and her team, because we think we might have to interface with schools. Financial support for the care sector is covered in section 9. There were various grants that came to councils that we had to pay out to support the care sector, and we've summarised those in that section. Section 10 deals with support to businesses. We've provided an awful lot of support funded by the government to businesses. The headlines are 100% business rates relief for the whole of the 2021 financial year for retail, hospitality, leisure and nursery sector businesses. To give you a scale for that, that's just over 11.6 million of support to Hartlepool businesses. That covers nearly 47% of the town's businesses, if you exclude the power station, because obviously it's a unique business around that. We've paid out an awful lot of grants under various schemes to the government that the government have funded. So in grants paid prior to October 2010, we paid out mandatory grants of nearly 17.5 million and discretionary grants of 854,000. One of the guiding principles we followed in terms of administering that is to process payments as quickly as we possibly can, whilst remembering it's public money and we need to pay it out robustly. And we've included some stats that I think we've done really well. And I think that's been welcomed by businesses, and it was really important that we paid that money out as quickly as possible. Since October, the position's changed an awful lot. The grant regimes have become more complex, particularly as we move from local restrictions and then international restrictions. So we've set out in Appendix D the scale of those additional grants that the team have been managing. And the table over the page at paragraph 10.17 just provides a brief summary of the additional types of grants that we've paid out. And you can see there's another 7.9 million paid out. Just to give members some updates in terms of the Chancellor's budget. You might have picked up some of this from the press coverage. He is extending business rates relief for into 21-22. It's 100% relief for April to June, and then it is 66% relief for retail, hospitality and leisure sector for the period July to March. They're the same businesses that get the 100% extension. We're still waiting for the detailed regulations as to how that applies, how you calculate that, because on the face value it seems quite simple, but we'll have to follow whatever detailed rules are in place. And there are some significant changes to make that happen that need making to the national IT systems. But I'm sure that'll sort itself out over the next few weeks. There are also further business support grants to be paid out. They range between 6,000 and 18,000. They are dependent on the rateable value of businesses, and there are different grants between The hospitality, accommodation, leisure and gym and personal care businesses, they receive higher grants, and other businesses that the government have classed as non-essential retail for this purpose receive lower grants, again based on their rateable values. We're still waiting for the guidance. The government have indicated that that guidance should come out sometime next week, and those grants can only be paid after the 1st of April. Additionally, the government are going to provide another local discretionary fund. Nationally, it's 425 million. The government haven't yet said the basis for allocating that funding, so it may be different to the previous allocation. If it were the same as the previous one, we might have another 700,000 to pay out to our businesses. The government have somewhat moved the goalposts in relation to the first discretionary grants. They had said that authorities had until March 22, so just over a year to spend that money with their businesses. They've now said that the second phase of discretionary grants, you will only be able to draw the funding down once you've spent 100% of the first funding. The way we were dealing with this, that we were actually front loading spending. The first tranche, it made more sense to get money to businesses as quickly as possible. We're working through that over the next few weeks to work out how close we get to the 100%. And if we need to do anything to get to 100% to make sure we draw down the second pot of money, we'll bring forward proposals to do that as quickly as we can. We think we are in a good position. In terms of the systems we put in place when we didn't even know this little change might come along from government. So that really, to some extent, highlights how difficult the position's been. I think a few points to conclude, really, in section 11 of the report. I don't think any of us expected the scale of public spending that we've seen a year ago. It's certainly supported the council. It's certainly supported our businesses and individuals. I think we'll all be paying for this for a long time into the future, but I think it was necessary spend. In terms of the scale of the support that the government provided to Hartlepool, it's £59 million. 64% of that, so 37.9 million, is support that's gone to our businesses. Another 8.6 million, 15% is support that's effectively gone to households in the care sector, those that are vital, and about 21%, just over 12.5 million, is support for the council. So that's the extra costs that we've had to incur, and the income losses, which do include the significant impact on council tax income. I think there is still uncertainty around how the economy, how our services come out of the pandemic, and hopefully that will be positive over the coming months as the national lockdown arrangements and the roadmap out of that come into play. We have got some funding in the current year. We'll need to be careful how that's used. As I've already said, that'll be reported to F&P. I think this report concentrated a lot on the financial figures because there was a lot of them. But I think behind all of this, there's been a huge amount of work across all departments of the council by lots of staff doing the normal jobs but taking on the extra responsibility. And I think it was something CMT just wanted to say, how proud we are of our teams, the extra work they've put in, the effort they've put in. They've known how important it's all been, and really just formally to the committee, CMT would like to formally record our thanks and staff to the staff who've been absolutely tremendous throughout the process in terms of delivering not just the financial figures, but the services that sit behind the financial figures, or actually are at the front of the financial figures. Because I think it's the services that have been important. What's been important about the money is we've accounted for it robustly as required by government. At that point, Chair, hopefully that was as brief a canter through the report as I could, given the importance of the issues.
Thank you very much for that, Chris. I think just before I pass on to other members, if I could just put on public record, Chris, my thanks to everybody who's been involved in the finance team over the past year. Quite frankly, the they've been the unsung heroes during a lot of this, because the amount of support that they've given to both benefit claimants and in particularly in their fast work in creating whole new schemes around the business grants as well, getting that money out the door and really supporting our local businesses in the first instance, but then not only just getting those initial grants out, but also then listening to the business community, listening to business leaders and understanding where the gaps were, and then responding to that and pulling together a set of discretionary schemes to help people out as well. So I'd just pass on my thanks to the team if you can, Chris, because it has been appreciated. Councillor Tennant.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's a lot of what you just said, actually. I just want to pass my personal thanks to the team for being proactive and being very quick to offer support to businesses throughout this this crisis, and particularly right from the very beginning. I'm very, very pleased that Hartlepool Council has been incredibly good at getting in touch with businesses, listening to what problems they have, and offering the support that they need throughout this crisis. So really, it's just a case of saying big thanks to everybody, and well done. Keep going. Thanks.
Chris.
Sorry, Chair. I just wanted to echo what's in the report, really. It's been an extremely difficult year for everybody, and our staff have been outstanding. And, you know, we've had engineers delivering food parcels, we've had culture teams out in the support hubs doing street ambassadors work. We've had everybody, and even councillors who've been working in our testing centres. Absolutely, everyone's been amazing. And I think we should also remember that they've been affected by COVID as well. You know, some of them have been ill, some of them have lost people, and they've still continued to stand up and make sure that the residents of Hartlepool are fully supported. And whilst I know this is a finance report, I think we can't lose sight of what this is really all about. And you know, I'm so proud to have actually become managing director during this year. I know people have said to me, "What a year for this to happen." Well, actually, it's been a great year for this to happen, because I can't support the staff and thank the staff enough. So I just wanted to put that on record. I know you've said the same. So thank you.
Thank you, Denise. And Councillor Little. So.
Thanks, Chair. I want to thank the staff as well, but what's a few people have said to me, especially business owners, those businesses who have took the first grant of £10,000 and then they've closed and haven't reopened. I know a lot of people, like a lot of businesses, use that money to invest in their own business, either decorating or whatever. But is there anything we can do about those businesses who have taken the money and ran? Or
well, I'm sure Chris will come in, but you will probably, what you might not have noticed on the same day as the budget, and I certainly noticed, was that quietly there was a press release launched where they were beefing up the COVID fraud teams, which Chris might elaborate on.
I suppose two points to comment on. The grants were based on eligibility criteria that the government set and eligibility dates the government set. One of the criteria wasn't about businesses surviving, so there was there effectively was an inevitability that money would go to businesses that failed. And I suppose at the start of the pandemic, the government's focus was on getting money out into the economy to support businesses. But I think one of the downsides is that some businesses have folded for quite genuine reasons. They've tried the best, even with the support, haven't been able to survive. Regrettably, there'll be a few businesses that haven't even bothered trying. They've just took the money. It was interesting. A few months ago, we had a webinar thing with the minister on. And the minister was very much pressing local authorities to get the money out the door as quickly as possible. The minister then dropped off the call, and his senior civil servant then spent the next 45 minutes setting out the requirements around strong governance for the funding, the audit checks that we'd need to put in place, the extra control measures that would already been implemented around that predated the the budget. We have to submit monthly files of data to the National Fraud Investigation team. They're doing huge data matching exercises to prevent and minimise any fraud in the system. I'm sure at some point some of those issues will be referred back to individual local authorities to investigate. The government have so far said that if we've paid out the money in good faith and had good systems in place, that we are not liable for the losses. They will want us locally to try and recover the money, but only if we recover it will we have to repay it to government, so it will not lose out financially that way. And I think local government have pushed back hard to government to say, if you needed us to get this money out, there was no other way the country could have paid this money as quickly to businesses. And I'm sure the HMRC could never have done it as quickly as local authorities have collectively. So the flip side of that is we can't be held responsible for implementing the government's wishes. As I say, we've kept the systems. There's been a balance between making it quick and easy for businesses to respond, but having appropriate controls in place to minimise the risks of fraud, etc.
Thank you.
Councillor Akers-Belcher.
Thanks, Shane. I just wanted to echo some of the sentiment that has been put forward today. I think, especially, James Magog, who's come to the local authority, and there's been a baptism of fire as a new assistant director, and the fact that he has crafted and shaped a scheme that has touched all elements of the business community, even down to discretionary elements. And I just don't think he can be praised enough in the team to ensure that we've been at the forefront of making sure that businesses have had the support that they've had over the last year. And obviously, from my point of view as Chair of Economic Growth and Regeneration, I think we've allowed the economy to keep going in Hartlepool because of that support. Or if we hadn't got it out onto the street, we might not have had a local economy to go back to once lockdown restrictions are lifted. So really, it was just to put on record my thanks, as Chair, but also as a councillor, all the work that everyone's put in throughout the whole crisis and continue to do. And I think we're a long way from seeing normality, but I think we do have a light at the end of the tunnel, which is made all the better because of the work that the council and the volunteers have put in.
Great, thank you, Councillor Akers-Belcher. Okay, so that report then, the recommendation is simply to note the report, and obviously we've had a good debate around it, so if there's no dissent from noting that report, we'll move on. Okay, General Enforcement Policy 6.2. It's a joint one by the looks of it between the Chief Solicitor and Director of Neighbourhoods and Regulatory Services. Tony,
Thank you, Chair.
but Tony's going to do it.
Yeah, I believe so. Thank you. The purpose of the report is to seek approval for general enforcement policy set out in Appendix 1, which sets out the approach of Hartlepool Borough Council towards enforcement. Enforcement sits across a number of teams and departments within the council. While there are some specific enforcement policies, it was considered necessary to introduce an overarching general enforcement policy which encompasses all aspects of enforcement work undertaken. The purpose of the policy is to explain clearly the corporate approach towards enforcement. It provides guidance to enforcement officers, businesses, consumers and the general public on the range of options that are available to achieve compliance and legislation we enforce. The policy summarises our approach to bringing about compliance and what we do, and it's an umbrella one which will set out all the enforcement activities of the council, but it will still have underneath that separate specific service specific policies which will obviously follow within that. The Department for Business, Innovation and Skills Better Regulation Delivery Office published a Regulators Code in 2014, which we must have regard to when developing policies, and our code and associated guidance has been developed to form this new general enforcement policy. In terms of consultation, we carried out an exercise which ran from the 17th of August 2020 through to the 14th of December 2020. In addition to that, a number of key partners and organisations, as well as members of the public, were all consulted in terms of feeding into that response. In total, we got 72 responses, 63 were general, 9 from organisations. And what you can see within section 4.3 of the report is that the majority of people either agreed or strongly agreed with the purpose of the policy and what we were trying to achieve within that. Although, please note on bullet point 5, there is a slight error there because it says 85% agreed or strongly disagreed. That should be agreed with the factors taken into account. Therefore, Chair, it is recommended that the general enforcement policy attached to Appendix 1 is adopted. Where there are existing or proposed service-specific policies, procedures and codes, they will need to comply with the overarching policy. I'm happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you, Tony. There's no questions from me on this one, if I'm being honest. Just to comment that it's as a policy document, it looks good to me, and I just look forward to it having the enforcement teams back up to full strength so we can actually get to grips with it. Any other questions or comments from members? No? Great. So the recommendation is to approve the policy document in Appendix 1. Agreed?
Agreed.
Great, thank you. Just before we do then finally move into the closed session for the additional item, I just again put on record my thanks to all, on public record, my thanks to all members of the Finance and Policy Committee for especially this year, but more so for the past 2 years as well. There are some members of this committee who have indicated that they won't be continuing on after the May elections, and for those members, like I know Councillor Akers-Belcher and Councillor Thomas, thank you very much for your service on this committee. It's been much appreciated, and good luck with whatever you decide to do next. Right, so we need to go into closed session. Could I get someone to second that, please? Sorry, Stephen, were you going to? No? Okay, brilliant. Right, let's pause the stream.